nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down, my brothers, on the ground. I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me
Good evening and welcome to the Scottish Rugby podcast. As you can tell, this is not the usual programming. There's me in the chair. I'm Craig Manson, and the beers are uncapped. We've had a rubbish rugby weekend, and I hope you all strap in because we're ready to have a good old conversation and maybe a bit of a, what's the word, Jonny? A fight over some things. Are you gonna, is your piss on a rolling boil yet, Jonny?
I'm feeling combative, is what I say.
So the Scottish Rugby podcast is in association with the Scottish Rugby blog. We are on Twitter at Scottish Rugby Pod. Also, Scottish Rugby blog is on Twitter as well at Scottish Rugby blog, or on X if you're down with the kids. We also are on Patreon. And we usually have a ticker going across the bottom, but the technology guy has forgotten that. So thank you, Jonny.
You're right, I have.
And
there you go.
There we go. So you can go onto the blog for the latest news and views, and we've got some fantastic articles are written on the Scottish Rugby blog. So please have a look. You can go into www.patreon.com/Scottish Rugby podcast and subscribe. Because you usually get about an hour of us absolutely raving and talking about trying to set the world right, but unfortunately, usually the world fights back. So, what I want to welcome, we've got a couple of old faces and we've got a new face on the podcast tonight. So, first of all, we've got Jonny McGinty. How are you doing, Jonny?
I'm very good. Nice to see you.
Next, we've got Rory Baldwin. Not in a more modern Scottish Rugby jersey tonight.
Rory,
what's the story?
It was a deal. Oh, it was I was going on to Fanatics to look for baseball stuff, and they had like a 40% off sale that just happened to cover Scotland stuff the day before the South Africa game in the World Cup. So this sock was instantly obsolete after I bought it, before it arrived. Like, I ordered it, then we lost to South Africa. The World Cup was over, and then it arrived.
Okay, well, there we go. You're looking resplendent, mate. And from the Emerald Isle, here hating rugby as much as we're hating rugby over in Scotland, Caolan from the Caolan S Rugby podcast. How are you doing tonight, Caolan?
I'm good. All things considered, Craig. It's, I've done a lot of podcasts this week. None of them, they don't get any easier, I won't lie, but we're here. And I think it's the taking part that counts on a week like this for all of us. Just turning up, and we'll go from there.
Well, we can convince the Six Nations to change the scoring system to that.
Absolutely, why not?
Is it like a Montessori thing where everyone gets a medal for just turning up and taking part? So, news. We're going to move on to news at the moment. So, first things first, breaking news. George North has announced his international retirement. The old glass-jawed George North. What's everyone's thoughts on that, Jonny?
I think I'm always surprised by how much George North's actually played. I don't know why. I feel like him becoming a seasoned international, for as much as he's like was a lion all the way back in 2013. he always seems like he's not been around for that long, but he's got like 100+ caps and he's had a brilliant career. Like, fair play to him. And I think if I was one of the senior players in this Wales squad, I'd be desperate to retire as well. I'm amazed that Josh Adams isn't going the same way. I'll always remember George North for backpacking Israel Folau, which is one of the funniest things I've ever seen on a rugby field. But I think he's more than done his part for Wales and the Lions over the last few years. And fair play to him. Like, go get some money. Can't say I blame him.
And Rory, he's a standout. We've mentioned it before. He's a standout person for HIA checks. Do you think it's the right time for him to go, or do you think there's more left in the old horse yet?
Yeah, I think the right time for him to go was when he stopped being able to play in the wing. But I don't know if you noticed. I discovered today that there are curious parallels between the careers of George North and Sean Lamont. And I wanted to know if George North ever wore fingerless gloves. It doesn't have to be orange ones, but fingerless gloves. Because they both played for Northampton, they both played for Scarlets, and they were both not centres.
Well, listen, that's, it's amazing how many small connections there are in rugby, and fingerless gloves do tend to stretch across nations, so you never know. It could be interesting. Caolan, what's your thoughts of George North?
I'm glad I'm not the only one who thinks he's not a centre. I don't like to say I know more than Warren Gatland, but we're right. He's wrong. He's not a centre. He was a world-class winger in his time, and we'll all. Yeah. I think the one thing about the Folau thing is it aged so well with everything that came out about Folau afterwards. The idea of him, over some guy's back is just phenomenal. And to be fair, George North caused an awful lot of pain to Ireland in 2012, 2015. I'm going to say was the other one in Cardiff, but I'm going to say 2015. I could be wrong, but like, just what a player, and big. He is a big loss to Wales, even more than I think people will realise, just because they've already lost Bigger and they've already lost Alwyn Jones and so forth. So I hope he goes on and does well over in Po. Is it Po he's going to? I can't remember. It's Pro D2 or something.
Was it Provence or Po?
It's Provence, yeah. Provence.
Even better. He will just rip up trees over there and get paid, which, it's better than the £13 an hour they get in a Welsh region. So
absolutely. Well, the hits against Wales have just started already. So we'll just make sure that we're going to keep that going.
The minimum wage goes up this month.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and then if not to get into politics, but there might be a national insurance reduction, so that might help as well. So, Scottish rugby news. There's a new independent, non-executive director been announced for Scottish rugby. Chris Stewart. Who he? Anyone know who Chris Stewart is?
Yeah. Never. Well, and the thing is, I think it's probably not the worst thing in the world that you've never heard of him. Like, I think the more that we drag in ex-internationals and like ex-politicians for all the drama that caused, let's just get some people that no one's ever heard of that know how to do their jobs and leave it at that.
Now the question is though, the question you have though is he what's the word? He is involved with property. Is this a sign?
Sign of what? They're going to sell Murrayfield and build houses.
Murrayfield is we're getting moved to a greenfield site outside Edinburgh.
After they spent all the money putting the tram stop in, it would have to be near a tram stop.
Well, that's true.
Outside Edinburgh.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, absolutely. So, moving on, under 20 squads have been announced. They're all set to go over to Ireland on, I think it's a Friday night we play. Rory, what's your thoughts on the under 20 squad? Anything that is outstanding, or are we just trying to batten down the hatches and worrying about what the score is going to be?
Yes, I think a little of the battening down the hatches thing. I mean, I kind of had high hopes for them against Italy, or not high hopes, but I thought they might do okay. But it's the same sort of issue. We've got the depth to compete for 40 minutes to an hour, and then the bench comes on and it drops off. I mean, I actually think they've been better this year than they've been a fair amount in kind of recent years. They haven't looked as off the pace as they sometimes do, which I know is hard on the young lads. It's not like they're not trying, but I think just it's kind of exposing our lack of quality pathways at making guys ready to play test rugby or test-ish rugby. But yeah, I think Italy, Ireland, England have always got really strong kind of under 20 setups. So yeah, it'll be a tough one. I think Kenny Murray said that he's targeting the sort of junior World Cup thing rather than the Six Nations, which sounds a bit like an excuse, but yeah, he's maybe looking to build out the depth in his squad a bit. I mean, they have found some guys who've looked all right. I've been quite impressed by Hector Patterson, no relation, I don't think, to anybody. But he's only had a few chances off the bench. Robbie Deans, no relation to anybody. There's a couple of young guys there, but the question is, what are they going to do after this game against Ireland in terms of getting them ready for whatever comes next?
And Caolan, anyone to look for in the Ireland squad? Anyone coming through that's impressed you?
Yeah, I think the weird thing is, because Ireland have won back-to-back slams, and I don't want to just go on about how great they are, Anton, but like, because they've won back-to-back slams, there almost seems to have been a lull this year, and it's kind of like, oh, we'll see how they get on. And obviously, played out a cracking game in the Rec that was, a deserved draw. But in terms of players that have stood out, they look physically more powerful as a pack, first of all, than other Irish teams in years gone by. Evan O'Connell, obviously Paul O'Connell's nephew, he's going to be decent, but he's been brilliant as a captain, I felt like. Joe Hopes has interwoven between 4 and 6. He's been very, very good. The two hookers, Henry Walker and Danny Sheehan, been decent. Jack Murphy is son of head coach Richie Murphy, who's heading to Ulster, as you may have heard. He's been decent at 10, definitely had his best showing against England. And then Hugh Gavin at 12 has been very good as well. Brian Gleeson, who you might remember last year was one of the best players, he's missed most of the tournament through injury. So Luke Murphy is deputised at number 8 and has gone well. And then there's Ben O'Connor, and for anyone who knows Ireland and Ireland sport, he came through as a very talented hurler, decided, no, I'm going to go play rugby, got into the Munster Academy, and year 1 the Munster Academy is playing Ireland Cup rugby, and he's been really good as well. So it's a decently talented squad, even if it doesn't have the hype, but personally I feel like no hype is probably a better thing.
Maybe we need to get some mad shinty lads.
I tell you, listen,
send Kenny up to Lochaber.
I tell you, well, to be honest, I think it's going to be one of those situations where anything will help. But to be honest, well, the other thing is you've got to remember that the under-20s are mirroring the Scotland men's international squad by playing well in the first half and then going for a
no depth.
But anyway, that's a different story. So we'll move on again. Some changes in the Scotland, the full Scotland squad. Jonny, Ali Miller's been called up.
Yeah, he has. My man, Ali Miller.
Can't have Ali Miller and Andy Christie.
Well, that's the question. This is the big question about it, is that, Ali Miller, we all know what Ali Miller can do. He played well for Edinburgh and he plays very well for Glasgow. But is this obviously Alex Samuel and Max Williamson have been called in to train with the squad, so not almost like an apprenticeship style thing. But Ali Miller, what do you think this is going to help with? At the last minute, because obviously Hamish Watson, Glenn Young and Jamie Batty have come out the squad. Jonny, what do you think is going to happen? Why we brought him in? Do you foresee him being named on the bench?
It's a weird one. I don't see any scenario that he's named on the bench. To be brutally honest with you, barring something drastic happening injury wise in tomorrow's last training session, I don't see how he usurps anyone who we've got in the back row, where we've had some of our standout performers for the whole tournament. Why he's been called into the actual squad and Alex Samuel and Max Williamson are just training with the squad, I'm not really sure. Whether it's like some sort of administrative thing that you need to have done, I don't know. I think Ali Miller's a phenomenal player, but I don't see how he gets anywhere near the matchday squad on Saturday. I think it's just a bit of a quirk of the squad system would be my guess.
Yeah.
Does he play like any of the Irish lads in playing style? Is he just there as an imitation for someone?
Not that jumps out from off the top of my head.
He's got pace though, and that's one thing that is noticeable about him for a back rower. He's
He is rapid.
So he is rapid. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I move over to just a little bit more news to try to pad out the disastrous conversation we're going to have fairly soon. Over 5,000 tickets sold for Scotland v England women. Surely we're going to shout about that tonight. Sounds a good thing, Rory.
Yeah, I just hope they don't sell it too quickly because I'm still planning to try and get one. It's great that they are great that the stadium is busy. I'm really hopeful that in a couple of years there'll be enough demand that they get into the big stadium, because I think that would be well deserved. But I think it'll probably be a good couple of years if they can have a couple of years of sort of sellouts, start building and if they get the results, that's only going to help.
So, are we seeing a boost on from the Celtic Challenge? Obviously, not to talk about this very much, but Edinburgh finished second. Unfortunately, Glasgow came in at the last wooden spoon swap of the Celtic Challenge at sixth. Caolan, how do you see the women's game growing over in Ireland? How are you finding that? Has the Celtic Challenge had any sort of impact?
I've been lucky enough. I've got the chance to speak to one of the Ireland internationals who played in the Celtic Challenge, Maeve Dealey, and she spoke about there was a huge impetus from Scott Beeman to be involved in these two teams, for him to have his direction and his style to be something that they're looking at, and so that as many players as possible could be in the Irish picture. So straight off the bat, that's good. Like the Wolfhounds obviously won it, but we knew they were going to have a strong squad that was going to compete anyways, so that was kind of to be expected in some regard. But the fact that there is this kind of vision for both teams to have kind of not playing off the same hymn sheet, but kind of in a direction that is the direction which the national team wants to go. I don't think that's a bad thing, because there's been plenty of missteps. There's been plenty of issues. I think even the selection of the squads caused a lot of debate because there was a lot of senior internationals involved. Excuse me. And people want to see them playing All-Ireland League. But ultimately, a little bit of confidence is probably no harm. Both the sides competed very well. And I think it could be one of those things like the Shields and the EuroC. If they didn't have to play each other at least once, maybe the Clovers would have been that bit higher up the table then as well. And there's all that. But it's still like, I wouldn't be too negative on it. I think they used it to the best that they could. I wasn't a big fan of the fact that it was kind of 9 weeks long and it kind of dragged on and things like that. But I think from a player point of view, if the players are happy, the coaches are happy with how it went, and coming off the back of a successful WXV3, hopefully it's just something that'll keep the vibes good and keep them flowing, and that is badly needed in Irish women's rugby. Like, there's better people to talk about than me, but it's been a septic last 3 years or so. So hopefully this is a refresh in year, and hopefully the Celtic Challenge is one of those things.
Absolutely. And Jonny, with Edinburgh announcing their player numbers, they've given 34 players caps for announced their cap numbers, etc. for Edinburgh. Glasgow haven't followed the same route. Is this a difference in style from Glasgow? Is it something that they're just not ready to put in place, or do you think that it's just Glasgow aren't up to speed yet?
I don't know, and I don't really understand it, because the approach, certainly in terms of everything else while the tournament was going on, seems to have been quite uniform. And I think had the fingerprints of being directed from inside Murrayfield, I think that the press and the social media and stuff was quite kind of even. I felt like I saw more of Glasgow's, but I think that's probably because I see more of Glasgow on social media anyway. But I think that they seem to have a sort of quite similar idea of how they're going to present it on social media and how they were going to do their match day experience and things like that. And I think it was a centrally controlled thing. So I would have expected them to both do the same. And I think it's a bit strange that Glasgow haven't yet. I'm assuming it's probably coming soon. I would hope.
Yeah. And just to finish up with it, Caolan, the Irish Wolfhounds, were impressive. They've played very well and have finished at the top of the Celtic Challenge. We talked about it just before we came on air, and you mentioned that they were fairly quickly thrown together. What do you think? It's just there's a layer of class within the Irish setup, women's setup, or have they just, lucky's the wrong word, but have they just have they managed to just hit a rich vein of form?
I think it's. I'll try and explain it the best way that I can. I think there is a lot of talent in the country, in the All Ireland League in particular. But the problem is the All Ireland League Division 1A, the only league that they have, the only senior league that they have for women's rugby is 8 teams. There's 4 contenders. There's 3 teams who are all right and will be competitive amongst themselves. And then there's one, maybe even one of those 3 then as well, who are just making up the numbers and struggling to field. And there is that issue. Like the Wolfhounds team was mainly Blackrock, Railway, Belvedere, who are 3 of the top teams in the league. The Clovers team was predominantly UL Bohemians, who are running away with the league at the moment. Now, funnily enough, UL Bohemians only have 1 player in the Ireland squad currently, in terms of who's actually playing All Ireland League for them, not players who came from them. So it's a bit ironic that way, but there is a league there with 4 very good teams where an awful lot of players could probably play international rugby, even maybe not at Six Nations level, but say the WXV2, the WXV3 level is decent enough. So there is talent there. It's just, I don't think it's been harnessed very well. I don't think we've kicked on very well. I think the big issue was probably not building on the All Ireland League as a league and not building strength from there and try to chase the provincial dream. And now with the Clovers and the Wolfhounds, people probably claim they lack a bit of identity. And I think that's fair enough because they're, Leinster and Ulster, yeah, they're right beside each other provincially, but like that's the entire east coast of Ireland. It's not exactly, a great region to base it off of. But I think if we do end up seeing the Celtic Challenge become a mini URC, I think the way to go is probably provinces, or maybe stick with this for the time being. But I think provinces is the way to go if you want people to get behind it. And then, like, the pathways are good. There's talent there. I know today was Munster senior and junior schools finals days, which is only the 3rd in its era when you compare that to, say, 70, 80 odd years of boys schools finals. So there's talent there and they're getting the most out of it. But fortunately, at the very top level, it's probably not being pushed on to the degree it should be. And hopefully in Scott Beamond and in Niamh Briggs, who many might remember, former Ireland international fullback, she's now head of pathways in Munster, head of pathways in Ireland, and hopefully they'll start to just develop it and just harness the talent that's there, because it is there. We develop wonderful natural athletes, wonderful natural footballers. Hopefully we can build from strength to strength and leave the last 3, 4, 5 years behind where it needs to be left and forgotten about.
Caolan, can I just check? Are you saying in the women's team, Limerick have the team that's actually winning and they've got 1 player in the international squad, and then all of these kind of shonky Dublin area teams that aren't winning anything, that's where all the players for the national squad go to?
Johnny, you have been taught very well. That is exactly what it is.
It just sounds awfully familiar to me. That's why I was just wanted to double check that.
It doesn't sound awfully fresh, I suppose you could say. But, no, look, there is that, and it caused a bit of consternation. But when you go for a contracted route, this was probably always going to be one of the drawbacks, that a club like UL Bohemians in Limerick could push on, and they could be walking away with the league because they've got a huge catchment area because they're a college. And then teams in Dublin where there's 3 or 4 of them, and like they'll have, college players, they'll have some of the best Leinster players, but they're all contracted and they're always going to get in quicker. So this was probably just a natural evolution to it.
So Rory, is this more and more of a push towards a URC, a women's URC?
I think you would like to think they'll get there at some point. I don't have any idea whether the Italians would be able to field two teams, but you could start it off like a Pro 12 sort of, start with as many teams as you've got and get a league going. But I mean, there's a professional league in England that seems to be doing pretty well. Most of our professional internationals are playing down there, one way or the other. So yeah, I think I think the problem certainly in Scotland will be finding ways to support it. Obviously, linking the two teams that we've got to the existing pro teams, and presumably eking out funding from their budgets, or from more money being plugged in through Murrayfield. That will probably work for us. I'd imagine it could be made to work for Ireland with the if the RFU are going to pay for it. Who knows what the Welsh will do, and the Italians. You would need an Italian rugby expert to tell you. But I think that surely has got to be what they're aiming for.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've delayed and talked about the news as much as we possibly can. We better start talking about the weekend. And Caolan, just to make sure that you do realise that we are going to talk about Ireland and England in a minute, but I suppose we have to kind of get involved in the inevitable chat about Scotland, Italy. Jonny, how are you feeling?
I think not as bad as a lot of other people. I think obviously it was a sickener, it was a heartbreaker. Given everything that happened at Twickenham, then later on in the evening, it was especially heartbreaking. But I think I said to you, Craig, when we were in Cardiff the first weekend, that after watching those first two games, I was more concerned about Italy than I was about either England or Wales. I think they've come into this tournament obviously refreshed. I think their decision-making needed some work. That was pretty obvious against England. But they obviously did work on it. They were a kick away against France. They were almost a kick away against England as well. They got turned over pretty convincingly by Ireland, but then everyone has up until this weekend. And I could see it coming. It's gutting that it happened against us. I don't think it should have been as much of a surprise as some people kind of took it as. I think the players have got a lot to answer for if some of the stories that have been coming around, swirling around the press are true. But I also think that a lot of people, both in Scotland and outside Scotland, who are making a lot of this weekend's game, need to remember that very realistically, Italy could finish third this weekend. They could finish above Scotland, and they could finish above whoever loses the France-England game. So, yes, we are the team that lost to Italy to start with. I'm pretty sure Wales are going to lose to them on Saturday. France very, very nearly lost to them. England were lucky to get past them. If they finish third in the tournament, they're good value for it. They've been a great team. And the days where you go to Italy with your B team and you rack up as many points as you can in case you need your points difference at the end of the tournament have been disappearing rapidly for a couple of years, and they are well and truly gone now. So gutted about it, because that was our chance to win the tournament. It was the best chance we've had for a long time. But I'm also not outraged that we lost to Italy, because I don't think that is the same as what it would have been even 2 or 3 years ago.
So, Rory, tuning out, has the Tuesday clock going closer to midnight?
I've been a long supporter of Townsend, but I think that it's starting to look like a plateau or pattern. We're getting odd good results against everyone apart from Ireland. We're putting the odd record or long-standing hoodoo to bed, but we're also still showing a lot of the same faults that have been dogging us since probably the 2019 World Cup, since before then probably. So that's a long time for the same sort of things to be going wrong. like the team going out and either looking extremely well prepared and then dropping off the face of the planet, or going out and looking extremely unprepared and then coming back into it when it's too late, or some combination of the two. We've seen a sort of hybrid of that where you get a little bit of last 5 minute excellence that doesn't do any good because the game's gone by that point. So yeah, I'm starting to compile a short list in my head of potential replacements. I mean, the thing is, there's probably not that many out there. There's also the fact that he's got that big juicy contract that runs through until 2026, I think it is. I mean, the players say that they back him, but then they would.
They don't want to be cut, do they?
Dodson's not going to be around to back him for much longer, and I think it might be interesting to see what happens if we go out and obviously we'll come into the Ireland game later. If we go out and put like a better performance against Ireland than we have, if we basically put the Stuart Hogg dropping the ball performance, but nobody drops the ball over the try line, that would, that might be enough to say, okay, well, it's not been an awful tournament. If we win the Triple Crown, it's very interesting because that's a bit of silverware that we haven't done. But I think if we go out and sort of capitulate, as we have done pretty recently every time we've played Ireland, certainly in World Cups or in pressure games, which you could say this is a pressure game. Ireland are playing for the championship. We're playing for a bit of silverware. If we go out and do something in the bed that we can't repeat on this version of the podcast, then questions are going to be asked. There's certainly, I've seen a lot more comments saying he's got to go than I have at any other point. So the mood amongst the fans is growing.
Yeah, well, surely, we're looking at a 7-year period. We're celebrating that Tooney's one of the longest serving coaches in the Six Nations, and you're looking at someone who's now 7 years, and really, we haven't won very much. In fact, we haven't won anything. And it's anything of any stature anyway. And we really have to start thinking: are we kind of at this point where we need to start thinking about backing up and letting someone else, let someone else have a go? Caolan, looking in from the outside, what's in your mind of what's going wrong with Scotland? Apart from us thinking that we're too good for our boots, yeah? Or too big for our boots.
I mean, I could go down that line and I'd probably get a message off Tom English being like, the Scots aren't arrogant or whatever else he likes to come on. But no, look, I think, like you mentioned, the second half malaise, like that's inexcusable. Like what we saw, we discussed on my own pod on Monday night, like you just can't have the second half Scotland have had in the last couple of weeks. And maybe some of that is coaching. Maybe some of that is on-field leadership. Maybe it's belief. We don't know. We'll never know. That's the thing. And that's where winning a Triple Crown could feel bittersweet, because maybe it masks over some of the cracks in some regard. We don't know. Obviously, I don't want to see you win the Triple Crown at this stage, but or at any stage. But it's a weird one, because I think, like, for years the narrative about Scotland was, oh yeah, they're just kind of, they're doing all right, but like Finn may have lost in this game or won them this game. I think Ben White and Finn Russell have been Scotland's two best players in the championship, looking from afar. Some people might disagree, fair enough. Just from my perspective, I think, the likes of Rory, who's also co-captain, which I thoroughly do not believe in, I think he's been really good. He's stepped up as well, and like, it's hard to pinpoint it, and maybe it is just the intangibles of why have the second halves gone so poorly. And like, I know Rome is a tough place to go, and like that game was over with that try that was then disallowed, and initially go down the field and score, and then it's game on again. But you just can't let that happen. And like, to find yourself, 12 points up at one stage and then 9 points down at another stage, that's just too much of a swing. And we talk about like Wales, for example, and how their bench is letting them down. The Scotland bench isn't bad enough to be in that situation either. Maybe the only thing I could say about Townsend is maybe he's not using it right. Maybe the impact isn't coming at the right times, and he tends to make late changes, like very late changes. Maybe that's part of the issue. I don't know, but certainly I think everyone needs to stand up and look at that performance the weekend. And yeah, lost to a very good Italy team, an Italy team who was promising and threatening and finally delivered. But Like it's basically the same thing as what happened against Wales, except you didn't get out of jail this time, and there was a little bit less time.
Yeah, and so Jonny, that's thing. Andrew Archer, one of our patrons, I asked for some hands in the ruck, and which we'll cover in the Patreon part of the pod. But he did bring this up. Is Townsend not using his bench correctly? Should we have gone for a 6-2 split against Italy? And also, why is he bringing players on at 65, 70 minutes that could probably make a difference, Jonny, further in?
That's something that's always confused me. I don't know what the answer to the bench is. I don't know if there's a silver bullet to it, but I don't think that the answer is bringing people on at 70 minutes, especially the way he's done that earlier in the tournament when he brings George Horn on after 70 minutes. Like, George needs half an hour, 25 minutes, half an hour. Xander Fagerson needs to not be playing for 75 minutes. Xander's a phenomenal player. For me, he's one of the best tight heads in the world at the moment. He's absolutely excellent, but he cannot do it at test level for 75 minutes every week. If you don't trust the players that are coming on, you need to find a way to deal with that, because we are either asking too much from our starters, or we're not trusted enough in our bench players, and we're ending up in this weird sort of no man's land. I think we need to have a serious look at the bench. I think you don't ever want to drag certain players, but there were players coming off the bench on Saturday, and I think everyone will probably know as soon as I say it who I'm talking about, who looked like they were not match fit, who were not where they needed to be for large parts of the game when they came on. And that is a serious, serious issue.
Yeah. So, Rory, moving away, we're going to talk a little bit more about Scotland, Italy in the Patreon part of the pod. But moving on to another game at the weekend, with England beating Ireland, was this Scotland's only chance of a championship? Because are we?
It's interesting. I mean, there's been a lot of chat about golden generations and all that kind of thing, and one of the reasons people are so kind of shouting so loudly about Townsend is the kind of opinion that he's squandering this group. And you look at the under-20s, it's hard to see that there's another team as good as this sort of waiting in the wings for, after the next World Cup, say. So a lot of these guys, I mean, Huggy's already retired, who was arguably kind of the spearhead of that in terms of playing. Finn, obviously, these guys don't have an infinite amount of time to do something. And with Scotland's depth being what it is, what we're talking about, there's only going to be, a few opportunities. The other team, I mean, some people think we're going backwards. I don't think we're going backwards. I think we're just kind of staying where we are. But the problem is, like, Wales have been pretty rubbish, but they're blooding new guys. Their players have shown some spirit. Next year they're going to be better. England arguably have, since we beat them, become much better and have kind of tapped into something. So I would imagine next year the Calcutta Cup is probably going to look a lot different. France, I don't know what's going on with France. Ireland have shown that they can pretty much maintain that level that they've set. I mean, they can't win everything, so someone's probably going to beat them eventually. But I think the other teams are sort of creeping past us, and we're going to beat even Italy. Italy are now, they look like they've got players who are playing for each other and playing with a bit of heart, and they finally match that to players who can execute at a decent level. So unless we figure out how to win these games, how not to switch off, then we're going to be back to wooden spoon battling in a year or two.
Yeah. So moving on, we have a game coming up at the weekend where Scotland, if they score 39 points,
34 points.
Sorry, 34 points more than Ireland, and if England beat who are England playing?
No, France would have to beat England.
France would have to beat England.
And we have to stop Ireland from getting a bonus point as well.
And we can.
It's got like 41-6 or something.
So an incredibly positive move into the weekend. Jonny, any changes to any team changes you would like to see on Scotland's side?
Ben White back in. for a start. I mean, if I could wave a magic wand, I think we've realised this weekend how important Sione Tuipulotu actually is. I don't know how we replace him. I think Cam Redpath and Hugh Jones did fine, but there's just a spark missing without Sione. So I'd probably stick with the centres we've got, but that's only because I can't have the one that I want, really. I might go with a slightly bigger back row against Ireland. It's difficult because Ireland's back row are so big and so scary, but also so athletic. So I don't think we have the pure size, physical athletes that Ireland have in the back row. So it's whether we go for our biggest one and we try and just knuckle down as much as we can, or whether we go for a more athletic back row and try and play around them a little bit more. It's tricky. I don't know. I said way back at the start of the tournament that I could realistically see us play 5 different back rows in 5 different games, and I think that's probably going to happen. But I couldn't tell you which 3 are going to start at the weekend. The main thing is we get Ben White back. That's most important for me.
Yeah. And Caolan, same question to yourself. Are we going to see Ringrose back in the centres?
I can't support that if they do, to be honest. I think Henshaw and Aki, it's a weird one. England got everything right on the day, and that's like, yeah, it pains us to say that, obviously, but like they got everything right. But for Ireland, where was I most disappointed? It was probably Dan Sheehan, Caelan Doris, and Joe McCarthy in the pack. Bundy Aki, I think I made this comp during the week, but like he kind of reminded me of a NFL running back. He just kind of had to just run and just hope to God that the space opened up at times, and hope to God you were just making yards, because it was blind alleys. It was blind alleys a lot of the day. But like Joe McCarthy touched the ball 4 times. Caelan Doris was pretty anonymous. Dan Sheehan started all right, but his throws were poor. He don't really impact on the game, and that's kind of been the issue for Ireland when they've lost. And obviously it's twice in 5 games, or it's twice in 2 years, depending on what way you want to look at it. But it has been the key heavy impact guys, the guys who were asked to take on a huge workload, who are the ones that are not performing, and the ones who are played out of the game. And you know, I can excuse McCarthy, he's only young. Doris, it's becoming a little bit of a trend, which I don't like. I understand, and you recognize this as well. You've been watching the game longer than I have, but back rows, the best back rows in the world, will go through a period where they just get so studied they can't find a way out, and then they do, because that's what all the best have done. You know, it's a cycle, it's sport. But Doris was one that was disappointing, and I feel like if Ireland are going to make a change, it's also not going to come there, because the balance is right, you know, the makeup is right. And I think Andy Farrell has spent so long backing the guys that he knows and trusts. I think if he throws that away for this game, especially against a team who Ireland have not really struggled with, I think it would be a sign of desperation then as well. I bring in Ringrose, to your earlier point, I bring in Ringrose onto the bench. I think 6-2, it kind of backfired, but at the same time it backfired because in every game, the 6-2 bench, there has been no spark off the backs. None whatsoever. Like I'm not a big Kieran Foley fan. I think he's a good utility player, but I think he's a provincial level utility player, not international. And Conor Murray, he's not the best scrum half in Munster at the moment. I'd still back him. I'd still, give him the game. Don't let people, don't feed him to the wolves. But I definitely have Ringrose back in there in the 5-3, and I'd probably leave out Ryan Baird. Probably. I'm not 100% sure. I know he's probably the spark you're looking for, but it's been pretty non-impactful as well. And that's the one thing that's disappointed me. Apart from the French game in round 1, the Irish bench has not been fantastic. A couple of highlight reel moments, yeah, fair enough, but it's not. When you go 6-2, you need an impact. You need an instant impact. And I have not.
I think that's kind of been the problem with Scotland and Ireland going along this 6-2 route, is that like we're copying a team that have got 2 world-class front rows, and then the one back that we're bringing off the bench for a long time was Franz Stein, and like we don't have that. Scotland don't have it, Ireland don't have it. It only works. The 6-2 only works if you've got the personnel to carry it out. Like, everyone now seems to think that having 6 forwards is the way to go and it's going to be fantastic and you're going to bring on 6 fresh forwards, which is fine. If you're bringing on 6 fresh forwards that are all right, it's not as good as having an extra back and having a little bit more option on the bench. Like, unless you're bringing on the forwards that the Springboks are bringing on and you're bringing on someone like Franz Stein off the bench, the 6-2 is not as effective as just having a regular bench, for me, I think. And I don't think Scotland or Ireland have got the personnel to do it properly.
Ben Healy?
Yes.
He's our front Stein. No?
I might just jump in there because the Ireland team, typically on the night before, we get to hear it from Jerry Thornley, if you've heard of him, and he's predicting no changes. No, but Harry Byrne and Gary Ringrose onto the bench and removing the 6-2. So, listen, I just like to say I seen that after I said all this, so it's not beforehand. I think I nailed that, to be honest. Thank you very much.
I think the thing is, though, and also, you know, with our 6-2s that we had at the weekend, the big issue that depends very much on how Blair Kinghorn is playing. And unfortunately, Blair Kinghorn was pretty quiet on the weekend. And whether that's a headache or a hangover from his continual having to travel backwards and forwards to France to play in the fallow weeks, or what's going on, but he was fairly quiet. And I think, you know, when you've got someone who's playing at his level, who's playing well, that can then jump into wing or into 10, that's great. But if he's kind of just milling around at the back, making up the numbers, which a lot of the Scotland players were doing, it kind of it does go against the sort of the 6-2, the use of the utility back as such, I suppose. But Rory, this weekend, are we going to our death or Tooney's death, or are we going to go and upset Jonny? And every time the camera cuts to him, he's going to be grumpy and shaking his fist at the camera.
Took me a minute to work out you didn't mean me there, by the way.
No, I'm talking about a class player, Jonny. So I was talking about you, mate. No.
Also a mouthy prick, though, to be fair.
Well, there is that as well, but that's a different story. We're not on Patreon just yet, Jonny.
I'm going to have to edit that now.
That one's okay, don't worry.
We'll be all right. Facebook, don't mind that one.
Look, we'd all love to go and get a Triple Crown, but realistically, if Ireland sort of half turn up, and they're probably going to after losing the weekend, they're not going to be too happy about that. It's not going to be the procession that everyone was kind of predicting, but they're still going to want to take the tournament. Scotland are probably going to have to play 80 minutes of the sort of intensity rugby that they did actually in the last sort of everything up to Blair Kinghorn's knock-on right at the end against Italy, where they were basically keeping ball, going through the phases. They were getting forward. They were trying just about everything they could to break down the Italian defence. And they're going to have to do that for at least an hour. And they're also not going to have to not switch off. And Finn's going to have to kick all his goals. And we're going to have to hope that the ref sees things our way, especially at the breakdown. And it just seems a little unlikely.
Who is the ref on Saturday? Does anyone know offhand?
It'll be on the website. I'll just find out for you.
Right, so while Rory is doing that, we'll finish up the free-to-air part of our podcast with the last part of this will be predictions for the weekend, and we'll start with Jonny. What's your prediction for
Matthew Carley of England?
Matthew Carley.
Just thought I'd get that in before you made your prediction, Jonny.
Who's the assistants, though? This could make a difference. Do you have the assistant race?
Do you think Matt Carley hates Ireland more than he hates Scotland?
Well,
no, I think one of Matt Carley's friends might hate Ireland.
Matt Carley was the referee. Do you remember for Ireland-Wales last year? And he was going to was it Porter? He was going to bin.
That was
and
Barnes,
then Luke Pearce came over and went,
no.
No. I thought it was Matt Carley was refereeing, and either Luke Pearce or Wayne Barnes were the assistants. I just came over and went, "You're an idiot." Was it the other way around?
No, Matt Carley was. I don't remember what last game he ref. Remember the day Italy went down to 13 men because of that weird law loophole? He was the
Yeah.
assistant who had to talk Nika into doing it, which, yes, he did the right thing, but not at the time that anyone wanted you to do the right thing. You know.
Have you got the assistants, Rory? And I'll see how many points I'm putting on Ireland.
No, I've just got. I only
Just Matt Carley.
track the main ref on the site.
Do you know what? 24-21 Scotland. Why not?
There we go. There's a prediction. Rory.
Probably like, I think 36-20 to Ireland, and I think that's probably being generous. Sorry, Scotland. Usually I'm.
I think yours is a lot more realistic than mine, to be fair.
Yeah, usually I come up with some nonsense that I pull out of my backside to justify the fact that we're actually going to win a game where history suggests we're definitely not. But I'm done now. Yeah.
Yeah, and Caolan, what's your thoughts, my friend?
I think Ireland have to win. I think if Ireland don't win, we need to be putting in a bit of an inquiry on this team and how they've underachieved in the 3 biggest games of the 4 years or the last 5 years. But I think maybe 31-17. Personally, I am a Munster fan. I know. Sorry, guys, but I would like to see Jack Crowley play well, outplay Finn Russell, and be on everyone's team in the tournament. But there'll still be a former Scotland coach who won't rate him, so we don't rate him either. So it's fine.
Ben Healy off the bench for a drop goal to win it.
That would be my worst nightmare.
I would love that.
Well,
apparently he hasn't picked him yet, so.
Well, if you're going to be called Rugby Jesus, you have to do a drop goal at the end of the match.
I thought Jack Crowley was Rugby Jesus.
Jack Crowley is Rugby Jesus. Thank you very much.
Greg Laidlaw was the original Rugby Jesus.
Well, the original Rugby Jesus is back and is being proclaimed and worshipped in the southern part of this country, but that's a different story. It leaves me to say thank you to Jonny, thank you to Rory, and especially thank you to Caolan for taking the time to come over and be part of the first half of this pod. He's very welcome to come over at the Patreon, where it gets a little bit more.
You're allowed to swear, Caolan.
There we go. There's my national identity coming out.
So on that note, I want to say thank you all for your attention and listening to our diatribe about many things to do with rugby. It's been a pleasure to be the host tonight, and have a great night, and we'll speak to you all soon.
Bye all.
See ya.
Thanks, guys.
Right, everybody freeze. I hate this bit.
Yeah, we all go quiet, and then we start talking.